Hey, everybody. Welcome back. It's another episode of the Spartan Shadows podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Chris, and I'm joined by my co-host, Emmett. Zach, unfortunately, couldn't make it tonight, so you get just the two of us, and what we thought was going to be a light, easy, quick, updated podcast, plans kind of got derailed, so I guess we'll start right away and go into the news of the day. MSU Athletic Director Alan Haller relieved of his duties and will no longer be the athletic director effective May 10th, which is his last day. Sorry. In the meantime, Tom Izzo and Assistant AD Jennifer Smith will be acting interns while the search is conducted. They're hiring a search committee, and we'll be scouring the country for Alan Haller's replacement. Let's get right into it, I guess. Emmett, hi, welcome. Thanks for joining. What's your thoughts on Alan Haller being fired?
Yeah, so I was talking this through with, in our group chat, just talking to people about it, and honestly, some of the thoughts that I've seen summarized by the multiple articles written on it today, really check out. I know in December I posted a piece that saying, calling for Alan Haller's head is basically a dumb idea. And in terms of Alan Haller would be a great athletic director. He would be considered one of the best athletic directors for MSU if you were looking 20 years in the past. Just because the details of the athletic director in the new era of NIL and all the marketing and the ability to pay for players, that really has turned the athletic director into a lot more than just the guy who is able to make slam dunk hires and be there and publicly support his university, take a stand for his university and back it. And I know that was one of the complaints on Haller was he didn't take a stand for the university. There were complaints about how he never addressed the Central Michigan allegations with Connor Stallions, and how Central Michigan is still on the schedule for 2027 and 2029, if I'm not mistaken, for football.
Yeah.
That was one, I don't know how much of a Central Michigan played into the factor of MSU making the firing. I don't think at all. But the main citation for why they have relieved him of duties is looking for someone who is more active in promoting Michigan State in terms of appealing to donors to try to bring the money and revenue in for name, image, likeness for football, basketball, hockey, mostly football and basketball, your two main revenue sports. So I understand why the move was made, because in this new era, you can't just make slam dunk hires. That said, the non-revenue hires that we've been able to grade, obviously volleyball just got a new coach, so that one's paused, and I would put a pause on football with Jonathan Smith as well. The hires that Alan Haller has made have been phenomenal, but at the same time, this MSU is not a MAC school. You can't live off of saying your non-revenue sports are going to the Final Four, your non-revenue sports are going to the semifinals. That is great, but at the same time, you can't do that when you're Michigan State. You can't just live off your non-revenue. You can't be Akron winning the soccer national title. When you're Michigan State, there's going to be more expectations for a Big Ten school. And at the end of the day, that was the reason why I would say is you have to have those slam dunk hires, you have to bring the money in, and you're not bringing the money in. And frankly, football 5-7, 4-8, 5-7, 5-7. That is not a great past record, and it is a "what have you done for me lately" community for football.
Yeah, same. When the rumors started kind of hitting last night, I'll be the first to admit I was pretty skeptical, just because when you look at Alan Haller's body of work, yes, there's been complaints on sticking up for the university in certain situations. And yes, there's been complaints, obviously, primarily in the NIL department. The fact of the matter is everything he's done hire-wise, everything he's done outside of that has been, quite frankly, pretty awesome. And I think,
Agreed.
Like you said, had he been the AD under the Mark D'Antonio heyday, he probably would have been the perfect fit, just because it was about more hiring and promoting the university in non-fundraising amounts. But yeah, we'll have to see, I guess, where we go. NIL's obviously the focal point. It's somebody, Justin Thin was the first to come out and say that's going to be a primary focal point of the search, is somebody who's going to be able to promote and fundraise for the university and get the backing of the donors. There's been some rumors, I don't know necessarily how true they necessarily are, but some rumors that a lot of the donors just weren't happy with some of the decisions Alan Haller made, and that they're willing to put some big money into NIL programs, but they want it to be done maybe a certain way or a little bit differently than how it's going and how it's been going. And if that's the case and you have your big money that needs to come back into the university wanting to dictate it, unfortunately, in today's day and age, that's what's going to happen. So
at the end of the day, you need a guy with plans. You don't need a guy with ideas. And that is frustration I've heard, that it's just Haller was a guy with ideas, but never took plans to implement. And I've also heard from people who are donors that have said, I've just been unsure about donating to X program just because I don't know how that money's going to be used, how it is going to be spread. And if you have donors willing to publicly say that, then that is not going to be a successful route in the world of college athletics in 2025. Another thing for sticking up for the university, look at the tunnel incident against Michigan in 2022. The players letting your players get prosecuted and not a ton being said on Michigan State's part, I'm sure that built some tension and kind of seemed like the former football player was letting the football team get thrown under the bus. Yeah. And I'm not sure, that might have started some tensions. Not sure. Once again, same thing with the Central. Not sure how much that plays into it. But in this college athletics world, when you're letting the university, well, not necessarily the university, but at least the football program, at points look like a doormat that rolls over, that is going to cause some tensions when football is the sport that brings in the money.
Yeah, and I mean, I don't think we'll ever really know how close this became a thing, but I know a lot of tensions did start from a lot of people when Mel Tucker was fired and Harlan Barnett was in the process of kind of keeping the program afloat when that coaching search started, and ultimately ended in Jonathan Smith being hired. There was this, right or wrong, a good part of this fan base that was in the Urban Meyer camp to come here. And how quickly that got dismissed over character issues, rightfully so or wrongfully so, regardless of what camp you're in on that side of debate. I know that ruffled a lot of feathers. And if you had big money donors that were willing to put money up for, say, an Urban Meyer or another big name coach to come in, but Alan Haller reportedly was quickly dismissive of it just because it's not the right fit. That's his prerogative because he is in charge of that. But again, you're going to ruffle some feathers. And I know a lot of complaints when you see other schools, like I think when MSU first started in the NIL space and they wanted to stick to, representing their players and how name, image, and likeness should be and getting their names out there and kind of do branding through the university and setting themselves up for future success. I think that's how everything was intended when this first started. It's obviously gone off the rails a bit on a nationwide scale. And then you see universities directly competing with you that have these big money collectives put together by just random people that want to succeed, and the collectives will throw money at, a quarterback from Tennessee to come transfer or just saying or whatever, but you're throwing big money at these one players. And those kind of third-party collectives can really dictate the money. Willingness to maybe not do that at MSU could also ruffle some feathers too. Again, I don't know if any of this is for sure part of it, but you see these complaints pop up from people who are willing to donate money and who have been on record saying they're willing to back certain causes of this. And when that doesn't happen, I mean, I can't blame them. If I'm going to donate a ton of money, I would like to at least know where it's going or know that my funds are going to what I hope them in being intended to. And if that's not happening, then I get why people aren't donating. You're a major university, you're a top premier program in the country, one of the top echelon Big Ten schools in a conference that is one of the best two conferences in athletics. You need to be a player in this space. List of, intentions or not intentions, whatever. So I don't think anybody's going to debate.
When you're a top 25 program for revenue generated, you have 500,000 living alum, and you're in a top 2 conference, and you have donors publicly saying, I don't know if I want to, mostly because of how they don't know how funds are being allocated. You're gonna have to make the president of the university is going to have to make a move to try to get the donors back involved, and that's what our president Kevin, I can't pronounce that last name. Geiswitz?
Geiswitz.
That's the move that he had to make. He just got hired last year. Through seeing this and a year of how it's gone, he has decided that it is best to move in different directions as opposed to let the contract play out through September 1st of next year.
Yeah. And just, a real life example I can attest to. I've made it known that I'm not an MSU grad. I went to Central, but in just my alumni happenings, I've had Central contact me a ton about alumni donorships and donating to athletic programs and NIL just for my money, if I would care to be interested in donating to athletics. And from a lot of my friends that went to MSU, they haven't had any of those types of calls and any of those types of opportunities, even though none of us are willing to put in a ton of money like some of the big donors are, but just the opportunity. You got to be able to use the tools that you're given, and with an alumni base that big and the level of donorship that MSU has and some of the billionaires in this country and some of the echelon, you got to be able to utilize that and fundraise that. So if you're not succeeding, and whoever the next AD is, that's going to be their primary goal. And if that expectation isn't being met, I would imagine they're not going to have a super long-term outlook here either. So,
and we'll say this too: the Matt Ishbia situation looms large, where he was basically told by the NCAA, "Hey, you can't pay the basketball kids because that's a conflict of interest due to you owning an NBA team." We understand in a hypothetical world, if that's still around, you might still have Alan Haller as your athletic director May 12th. Yeah. But we can't live in a world of hypotheticals. And you can also argue, okay, you knew this was happening and this got canceled 2 years ago. Yeah, how are we still not at the point where we have a replacement stipend, at least, for your players? Because these guys, they know that, okay, I don't get a stipend here, but if I hit the portal, I can go to, for example, the University of Miami. They've poached 2 of the best defensive players from MSU in the last 2 recruiting cycles with Simeon Barrow and Chuck Brantley. They know I can go down to Miami, Florida, and I have a lot more money flowing my way, both from the university and from the NIL collectives. That does impact players, no matter how much they love the green and white.
Yeah. Well, and it's frustrating for fans, too, because you see things like that in place. And I understand why Matt Ishbia can't, and the NCAA putting the kibosh on that. And that's absolutely a conflict of interest. But then in the same regard, you see, it's been pretty publicized that Tom Brady being an owner of the Raiders and all that and everything he does, but he's still able to donate.
Michigan. Yeah,
he's still able to donate to collectives at Michigan and do stuff for Michigan in his free time too. So
the question becomes: did Alan Haller just say okay and roll over, or what happened there? Obviously, there's not going to be a ton of transparency. That situation was 2 years ago. I'm sure some of the people who were involved in that situation have moved on, but...
And rules may have changed, too. We don't know. That's the frustrating part of the NIL is we don't know. There's so much red tape with it. We don't know what's good or not.
There's a new rule 2 months from now.
So, but, they're all valid frustrations and questions that have been raised. And eventually, I guess, the donorship and everything decided that was enough, and the president agreed, and we're going to be moving in a different direction. So it'll be interesting to see who gets hired. I know there's some potential candidates already being thrown out as possibilities. I don't necessarily want to go into those right now just because the list is going to be ever growing. This is brand new. We're 12 hours into it,
We remember during the football coach how there was seemingly a new name. First it was Urban Meyer, then it was Jonathan Smith, then it was Jake Dickert of Washington State, then it was Charles Huff of Marshall.
Matt Campbell.
Yeah, you just kept bouncing between coaches from all levels, from professional to coordinator who hasn't coached in years.
Could we get Ben Johnson from the Lions? Could Nick Saban come from Alabama?
Yeah, you just saw everything bouncing around. But we're not going to... There is probably going to be an official interview or 2 that get announced, I'm sure, or get leaked. We can address those when those come out. Right now, we are sitting here at 8:30 at night, 10 hours after the news broke. We don't have anything concrete.
Yeah. So there'll be some interesting decisions made. Again, don't know anything. I would say I think there's an associate AD from North Carolina that's been thrown out as impossible.
I've heard North Carolina being thrown around as one.
That's obviously something that you could probably pencil in to be a possibility just because of our president's ties to North Carolina, where he came from.
Correct.
But without getting too much in it, too, he also kind of said the search committee is going to lead the way and they're going to identify the best candidates and he's going to be more hands-off. I know Tom Izzo is going to have a say in it. Jennifer Smith's going to have a say of it, probably. Former players, former coaches. There's going to be a lot of people involved that will have...
Hopefully with how it is, hopefully the donors do get to have at least part of a say. I'm not saying that the donors demand exactly who comes to the university, but the issue for why we fired a guy who was making slam dunk hires at head coaching positions is because of NIL, let the money talk.
Yeah.
I'm not saying you have to find the absolute most scummiest person who would do whatever for MSU to be on top, but you have to pull around with your big money donors.
Mm-hmm.
If we're willing to donate to candidate X, then maybe candidate Y, who might look objectively more qualified, then you might have to roll with the other candidate just to ensure that your money is going to be helping compete in this new athletic world in 2025.
And the last piece of information I'll add to the puzzle here, there is a decision looming in the House of Representatives and Congress on how NIL needs to be kind of rationed and the monopoly of it and a whole bunch of stuff like that. Should a decision come with that kind of limits how funds can act and this and that could change something too.
The MSU making this move, though, kind of indicates they have a feeling on how it is going to play out.
Absolutely.
And they don't think Alan Haller is the best choice moving forward with how that House settlement will happen.
Yep, exactly. We'll see. Obviously, we'll keep you guys updated with all the information that comes out with that. The leaks, the the AD potential candidates, any news.
Sounds like we have a new weekly podcast segment for the time being.
Yeah, what candidate do we think is going to come in and take over the athletic director job? And
flavor of the week, which candidate do we want?
Here, I'll go out and throw a potential name right now. If MSU wants to hire me, I'll do it for fairly cheap, and I feel like I could do a decent job.
But will you plead to all the donors for all their money?
I'm good at asking for money. We can do that.
Okay.
So that's not a problem. But yeah, so we'll keep you guys updated, and hopefully, I guess my official statement on the decision, I was a little shocked. I had no issues with Alan Haller. I understand the state of the football program kind of being the big what if. Like, if we go through next football season and big things aren't changing and it looks like we're heading for another, mediocre, then we can start to have these conversations. But I was fine with letting it ride out. But if this is the reason and the NIL is the focal point and you want to go to a more aggressive NIL approach, I can't really disagree with that because that's how college football is going. And in my mind, MSU should be a top 10 to top 5 NIL collective. And so if that's going to be the case, hey, let's do it. Let's new upgrade, new facilities, new players. Let's run it.
Yeah, it's just a matter of, I think, objectively, all of the hires that you can put grades on, which is basically every coach except Tom Izzo, Jonathan Smith, and volleyball. Because I believe you've seen a ton of turnover at coaches for Michigan State. Most of those coaches you can put an A+ grade on. Robin Freilich for women's basketball, A+ grade.
Adam Nightingale,
Jonathan
A++.
Smith, the start of the year, you would say A+ grade. Jonathan Smith after the Iowa game, A+ grade. Speaking of football, we can transition into that. Chris mentioned that football is one of those we don't know. We're going to see how this year plays out before we have these conversations about, say, Jonathan Smith. We were talking about this in the Shadows group chat in terms of, okay, but how does the football hiring factor into if there's any frustrations for Alan Haller? Personally, I do not believe so with going with Jonathan Smith. Sure, you have the Urban Meyer situation is still present, but it is still very to be determined with the Jonathan Smith hiring and the grade there, because in year one of a rebuild, with how many injuries the Spartans had, the best grade I can give Jonathan Smith for this year is incomplete or needs improvement. Because when you have so thin of depth in the secondary and the offensive line, it's hard to grade when both those rooms get decimated by injuries. And I'm sure we all know if Nick Marsh is healthy, Michigan State probably wins Boston College and goes bowling. But we can't live in this world of hypothetical what-ifs. So what we have is a 5-7 season.
Yeah. For me, Jonathan Smith, what he was able to do taking over the team in the state it was at the end of the Harlan Barnett term, post all the Mel Tucker fallout and everything. And this isn't I don't want to make it sound like I'm condemning the job Harlan Barnett did and Coach D'Antonio did to keep that program afloat. That was great, but Jonathan Smith being hired the weekend of Thanksgiving that year and being, a week out of National Signing Day, his ability to get in, keep a resemblance of a recruiting class, retain Nick Marsh, retain some of the bigger targets of that class, and then go on before the February signing day and add the pieces that he did I thought that was a tremendous job. I would give that an A+, just to be able to put a roster together that resembled what last year's roster started out as. I thought was a home run, because that program towards the end of the season with Mel Tucker and Harlan Barnett was in rough shape. We'll just put it like that. And that's no knock on the players, the coaches, or anything. That's just things weren't great. And to be able to retrain and still get it to where we improved a win total. Yes, it was only one game last season, but we improved a little bit. Had a couple of what-ifs where we could have went bowling. Can't live in the what-ifs, but had the potential to really take a step. Yes, depth was an issue. Yes, injuries were a big concern.
Yes, pass rush was a concern, but look at who you lost. You lost Simeon Barrow. You lost Derek Harmon. You lost By Job. You lost Andrew DePepe.
Yep.
You lost so much that could have been an impact or a depth piece that would have had more than the same 5 defensive linemen rotating throughout the game.
So
you wouldn't be playing Jordan Hall at edge rusher if you had the top 100 recruit By Job coming off the edge.
Yeah, that's why I kind of agree with Emmett in the grade of incomplete for the season, just because I can't really blame him for that, but at the same time, you'd like to see more out of that. But a rash of injuries, chalk it up to just luck being not in our favor. I mean, you can have the same argument with the Lions too.
Don't have the excuse this year.
No,
a bunch of you have 3 4-star freshmen, AJ Dennis, Peyton Stewart, and Rustin Young, all coming off of their redshirt year. They should be able to take that step up. In addition to the other 3 offensive linemen from that class alone, Rakeem Johnson, major contributor as a 3-star. Then you should have Cole Dellinger. Hopefully he's healthy for the first time since his senior year of high school. 4-star on ESPN from a couple cycles ago. You brought in 3-4 players who are expected to start at the offensive line. You bring back Brocious and Phillips from injury. So you have a lot of depth in your offensive line room. Your defensive backs, you added 3-4 corners. You added a safety in Tracy Revels. You just added Anthony Pinnis. You have a lot of depth and a lot of talent, because Pinnis is a All-American JUCO player. So you have a ton of talent coming in. You have a ton of talent remaining on the roster. There should be no excuse for, the depth. We had to start playing our freshmen in burning red shirts, because now you have that depth. So I'm not going to be giving that same excuse for Jonathan Smith if we're staring at a 5-7 record in December. Yeah.
So it remains to be seen. Obviously, the new AD is going to have its hands full on, football is going to be a big key with that, and the donorship of football is going to be important. But some other football news we can transition to real quick, too, just to kind of touch on the rest of football and moving into this year's team a little bit, too. We did want to wrap up our final former Spartans from last year getting minicamp invites. There were a few more announced since we last spoke. Daquan Dowse did get a minicamp invite with San Francisco. Jordan Turner got one with Denver. Tanner Miller to the Raiders for a minicamp invite. And then Montori Foster got one from both Seattle and Cleveland. So he'll have a couple opportunities to try to make a roster there. So congrats to all of them. Hopefully that proves fruitful for the guys. So any thoughts on any of those?
Personally, I thought Dowse and Turner both excelled during their sole year as a Michigan State Spartan. I thought they deserved to have not necessarily their name called on draft day, though I think Jordan Turner definitely deserved so, but at least have a contract heading into that instead of just an invite into rookie minicamp. Montori Foster gets to, when he goes to the Seattle camp, gets to reunite with his former teammate at wide receiver, Ricky White. And then his other option is his hometown team, the Cleveland Browns. If you couldn't tell by him teasing after the Iowa game, he kind of gave the local media a little bit of crap for the Guardians knocking the Tigers out of the playoffs. So if you can't tell, hometown Cleveland boy, he gets to have a chance to go and excel with the hometown team. And then Tanner Miller, we may have touched on that last podcast, but Miller was another guy. He was able to help hold the team together and the offensive line together when injuries started piling up. He was able to help everyone's transition by knowing everything from coming over with Smith, knowing the terminology that Coach Mahalchuk uses, knowing everything that Coach Smith is going to be expecting from them. I've heard from people that he was able to really help that transition for the team and was able to make everyone feel a lot more comfortable heading into Game 1 against FAU.
Yeah.
So congrats to them. Tanner Miller, shout out, as also I believe he was a former walk-on at Oregon State. So shout out to him taking, the hard way all the way to the league now with that minicamp invite.
Yep, absolutely. And then some Spartans from last year's team that departed in the portal. Just a couple updates. DJ Kennard signed with South Dakota today, so congrats to him on finding a new home. Caleb Coley signed with Eastern, so staying in state. He'll be at Eastern Michigan. Congrats to him for finding a new spot.
He'll be going against his former teammate Noah Kim.
Yep. Exactly. So, hopefully he gets a good run, minus when they play Central. But other than that, no, just kidding. Congrats to Caleb. I'm excited for him. It should be a good opportunity as well. And then a couple additions coming on today. MSU received a commitment from Cam Williams, edge rusher transferring from Georgia State. He's listed at 6'5", 245 pounds, so a bigger kid. Glad to add edge rush talent. And then we also added preferred walk-on athlete. He played linebacker and safety.
This is for 2026. This is not a 2026.
Yeah, for 2026, sorry. Played linebacker and safety, but who knows exactly where he'll fit in, but he is a preferred walk-on for 2026. Best name we might get, athlete Jack Lansing III. So he should hopefully fit right in with the Spartans, Lansing coming to East Lansing. So any thoughts on that?
Yeah, so starting with Cam Williams, this is his fifth school in 6 years. He started his career at Miami, Florida, then went to Troy for played 9 games for Miami as a true freshman, transferred to Troy, played 1 game, then year off of football, 2023 was in Jacksonville State, had 1 sack, 2 tackles for loss, and a forced fumble. Georgia State last year, mostly played at linebacker, 21 tackles, 5 tackles for loss, 1 sack, 1 forced fumble. Not necessary stats that would jump out on paper, but obviously the staff sees something in him. And he's one of those guys who he will be here for, I believe, 1 year, maybe 2. Not sure if he gets an extra COVID year because he did play in the 2020 season. So he has 2 years of eligibility remaining. And he is a player that will help, at the minimum, raise the floor. Hopefully help raise the ceiling for this team and provide another spark. He now gives 2 scholarship replacements for the 2 scholarship players we lost in the portal with James Schott and Anthony Jones. And I would say Isaac Smith is a good comparison for Jones. And then you can argue Cam Williams is equal or better replacement than James Schott based on just looking at stats, with Schott only having 5 tackles. Obviously, Schott also missed 5 games with injury, so that plays a factor. Williams did record a half sack in 2 of his final 3 games with Georgia State, so obviously ended his year strong. But overall, just a good depth addition. And then as far as Jack Lansing goes, that is the first defensive commitment for the 2026 class. Obviously preferred walk-on. He also held an offer from Pitt, plays for Heartland High School in Michigan, so if you're out there, go catch a game. They also have an interior offensive lineman who has actually received an offer from Central, Chris, so be sure to go catch a game while you're out there. So just overall, a good player that, especially safety, I won't say no to extra safety help, considering that room has 2 seniors in it, and I believe a third if you include Khalil Majid. He might have a redshirt year because of last season. Yeah. But you have Nakai Martinez, Malik Spencer, then you have Justin Denson as a sophomore, but beyond that, I don't know if any other safeties have taken collegiate snaps with Dylan Tatum gone and Jalen Thompson also leaving. Don't know if any safeties have taken collegiate snaps. Obviously, that will change this fall. But you are looking at a room that returns Justin Denson in 2026, and that is it for experienced players right now. Obviously, we'll see more as the season gets closer. You might see George Mullins playing there either as depth or special teams, just trying to get their feet wet and get those, as the staff says, 12 good snaps a game.
Yeah, so exciting news for former Spartans and potential future Spartans. Happy to have everybody land in good spots and maybe joining the squad for those joining the squad. I'll do a quick transition over to hockey real quick. There's a couple of breaking news things, and then we'll end the show with a couple of basketball news and notes. But for hockey, it was announced that both Coach Adam Nightingale and then Isaac Howard have been named to the coaching staffs and subsequent roster for Ike of the U.S. Men's World Championship roster, which is taking place here in about 8 days. Congrats to both of them. Nighty will be a part of the coaching staff, and Ike was one of the forwards added. Big opportunity for Isaac Howard because the World Championships do include some NHLers, not a ton because there's some still playing in the playoffs and stuff like that. But it's a big opportunity to play with pros and NHL level talent. Trey got the call to go with them last year and get some experience. So congrats for Isaac to be able to do that. And hopefully he'll have a good opportunity to learn to compete at the next level and bring some new parts to his game back for next season. The other piece of news, defenseman, we unfortunately lost one of our defensive players to the portal. Mr. Lukashevich is transferring to Miami of Ohio.
Finally completes the Red Savage trade. We knew that was happening at some point. That trade had to get completed.
Absolutely. And congrats to him. Sad to see him go. I thought his game was trending up at the end of this year, and I thought he could have been a big, not a big piece, but a good contribution to next year's roster. Miami, Ohio is getting a good one. They're also randomly bringing in the number 1 recruiting class in the country for next year so far with freshmen and portal commits. So in the ever-changing world of Canadian Hockey League players being able to come over to the NHL or the NCAA, now that's you're going to start to see stuff like that happen. So congrats to Miami. Last little bit of news: MSU is not officially signing, but we are trending in the right direction for a prospect for next season, a CHL prospect who's looking to come over by the name of Porter Martone. He is pretty much a consensus top 5 forward skater. That will be draft eligible this year. Very talented player. Very, very overall kind of good game. Plays a physical game, which I think will be very helpful for MSU if he so chooses to come here. So let's hope and cross our fingers for good news on that. He would join a really good recruiting class in our own likes, on top of obviously all the returning talent we have. Caden Lindstrom still seems on track to be a Spartan next year, so that's good. That's obviously another huge talent that MSU will be adding. I think those two would go well together. So more and more top tier talent that will probably be playing in the NHL that could be playing on MUN next season if all goes well. So cross your fingers on that. Hopefully Porter decides to come to East Lansing. But that's what I had for hockey additions. Emmett, did you want to add anything to that before we switch to basketball?
Just one thing, especially with Howard, I expect to see him playing for Team USA like his hair is on fire, because remember, especially with the situation with Tampa, he could use this as an opportunity to be a tryout if he wants to be, in NHL or in the fall. He can use that opportunity to really show out and try to get a team to trade.
Yep, the opportunity to showcase his rights. At the very worst, to get him in their system and maybe get him a fast track for next season if he wants to come back to MSU and then turn pro.
Look good for the scouts, because if he elects not to sign with Tampa after next season's NCAA season is over, that is going to be one of his last chances against top of the line competition. Not dissing NCAA competition, but they're not necessarily the same level as Willard.
Yeah. Yep, and so he'd be an unrestricted free agent for teams to sign shortly after if he didn't. So big stage for him to compete on and showcase his skills. So switching over to basketball, real quickly, we'll hit recruiting target, shooting guard Darius Adams. Was originally a UConn commit. MSU just lost out on him. He was in this year's incoming freshman class. We just missed out on him when he committed to UConn. Surprisingly, last week, decommitted from UConn. There was a thought that MSU was making a good run for him as a potential replacement for Jace. Unfortunately, bad news is we finished second yet again. Maryland came in and I'm assumably got a good NIL package together, plus some extra stuff.
NIL.
Yeah, that's the theme of this episode. But regardless of the reasons, Darius Adams is heading to College Park. So unfortunately, Tom Izzo just misses out again. So just wanted to update you all on that. Sad news. The other big piece of information, basketball schedule was released. Emmett will give you the full breakdown on it here. To lead us off, thought we actually got a fairly decent draw. We weren't Purdue lucky, who for some reason got like the best schedule ever.
Cakewalk.
We still, I think we're given a fairly favorable draw for Big Ten basketball standards. And so that's reassuring going into next season, coming off of the success we had, and hopefully can compete in that well. But Emmett, take it away on that one.
All right, so our home and away opponents we'll start with first. We have Michigan, Rutgers, and Indiana. And then obviously with Michigan, until the Big Ten gets sick of it, you're going to have Michigan, Michigan State hosting each other home and away. Then Indiana and Rutgers this year. Last year it was Minnesota and Illinois. Then in terms of your away only, so teams you will not be seeing at the Breslin next year, Minnesota, not entirely surprised there. Nebraska, Oregon, Penn State, Purdue, Wisconsin, and Washington. Obviously, not a fan of having to go to Purdue, Wisconsin, I would say Oregon, then kind of Minnesota, just it's not been favorable to MSU last year as the exception. It has not been the most favorable to Michigan State in the past. But overall, decent away slate. Obviously, you don't want to go to Purdue no matter if it's away only or home and away. You don't want to travel to Purdue, one of the most intimidating fan bases in the country. MSU is going on, a 12-year drought of winning at Purdue, I want to say now.
Something like that,
Which is, I believe, at that point, Cassius Winston might not have even been in high school. So take that how you will. Then, in terms of teams that are only coming to the Breslin and we avoid playing at their stadium this year, you have Illinois. That is, I will not complain about that. Iowa, the house that Fran built that Fran's no longer at. Maryland, Northwestern, Ohio State, UCLA and Xavier Booker, and then Southern California. Honestly, overall, pretty favorable schedule. I would say, like Chris said, favorable schedule. You don't have the same Purdue luck, but I was argued last year that Michigan State had that Purdue luck. Overall, not a bad schedule considering how lucky some people called our schedule last season. So, honestly, anything stand out to you, Chris, really, for who we're avoiding or who we have to play in terms of getting that home and away slate?
You hit it. I'd prefer not to have to play in Purdue, but, I mean, we have to eventually. Yeah, but I do enjoy that we don't have to go to either of the LA schools next year. Those are they're coming here, so that's a nice change because that proved to be costly for this team last year, and both UCLA and USC should be actually improved, or at least close to it.
And Purdue gets them as away only, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, that's the one knock on Purdue's schedule. Other than that, the rest of the teams are pretty easy coming to their place or not having to play the hard teams.
I believe Zach's comment when we were talking about it in a group chat was, well, they could very well go 0-2 in that UCLA-USC away sweep. And I was like, thanks for reminding me of that, Zach.
Yeah, so I'm glad we don't have to do that again. Going to Seattle and Eugene isn't necessarily going to be the easiest, but UW's basketball team isn't quite at the status they were a few years ago, so that's hopefully a little reassuring. Eugene's not the easiest place to play, but
avoiding State Farm Center, not bad.
Yep, so I think a fairly good draw for us, all things considered, so I'll take it.
Yeah, overall, excited that, you have the home and away. Excited to see how Indiana looks this year. They spent $1 billion on NIL. NIL mentioned again, I know. We should just have an NIL counter going at the top of the screen in today's podcast, but excited to see how this Indiana team looks. Not super intimidated by Rutgers now that their star freshmen are gone. That said, Rutgers was an away only last year. Didn't phase MSU really at MSG, which, shocking.
Yeah. But, and the RAC's not the easiest place to play either, so I'm
not at all.
Avoiding there's nice too. So, but yeah, hopefully we can build on the easier schedule and take advantage of that. But should be an interesting one. I'm still curious to see what the final pieces of roster construction are like. Of course, if we hear any, we're still probably one player away from finalizing that. So once we hear any news, of course, we'll fill you guys in on that as well, because we haven't yet, but hopefully soon.
Granted, with how this Thursday has been, it's 9 o'clock at night. We'll probably finish recording, and then 10:15, we'll get a portal commit or something. Yep. Just the way that news has been breaking today. Yeah, we've just been slowly editing our docket for what we're going to talk about today. We've been just adding 2 or 3 things at a time since about 6 p.m. until basically we hit record today, so...
Yeah, it keeps going and going. So went from this morning hoping to maybe push it and say, we could probably wait a few days just to be safe, but...
Or 12-minute podcast today, and here we are with the recording showing about 40 minutes.
Yep, so... All in all, big news day. We appreciate everybody tuning in. We'll obviously have more to come on a lot of this stuff, especially the AD surge as things come out to the public and are able to be reported on. So we'll let you guys know as soon as we know. We again thank everybody for tuning in and checking us out. We're going to have some fun show ideas in the future for the off season. Maybe some interactive one with some fans able to join, some more guests, stuff like that. Be sure to follow us on our socials and check that out, because we'll have ideas going and polls for questions, mailbags, potential opportunities to be part of the show, et cetera, et cetera. We appreciate it. Yeah, that's all we had. So I guess we'll call it there. Emmett, thanks for joining me as always. You guys, everybody, have a good night and go green.
Go white.